Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the absolute magic of descriptive storytelling. We're going to take this highly detailed, honestly pretty dense 70-word text, and we're going to tear it down right to the studs. We'll see exactly how every single word pulls its weight to build this epic visual and emotional landscape right in our minds. So consider this for a second. How do mere words build a cinematic masterpiece? I mean, before a director ever yells action or a digital artist renders even a single pixel, a scene has to be built with language. Think about how quickly a few carefully chosen sentences can paint this vivid, ultra-realistic picture in our heads before we even see an image. It's kind of like magic when you really think about it. Language is literally the ultimate rendering engine. All right, listen closely to our source material for today. Pay attention to the sheer density and the dramatic weight of this text as the pacing builds. A cinematic, biblical scene showing Jesus Christ walking through a stormy village at sunset. Frightened people are trapped by floodwaters and strong winds. Jesus radiates a warm, divine light, reaching out his hand to rescue a crying child and help struggling families. The storm gradually calms as he guides people to safety. Emotional faces, dramatic clouds, heavenly rays of light breaking through the sky, realistic water effects, cinematic camera movements, ultra-realistic, epic storytelling, highly detailed, 4K, inspirational atmosphere, hope, faith, compassion, masterpiece quality. Wow!
Okay, Section 1. Setting the stormy scene, constructing chaos.
Let's break down how the author establishes that initial conflict and tension. Every great story needs a setting that immediately communicates the stakes, right? Well, this text doesn't waste a single syllable building up that chaos. Just 5 words. A stormy village at sunset. But look at how much heavy lifting those 5 words are actually doing. They instantly set the location, a village, which implies a community, homes, vulnerability. And they set a highly specific, super moody lighting condition. At sunset means the light is fading, time is literally running out, the darkness is creeping in, framing the whole narrative with this palpable sense of impending dread. Now notice how the text deliberately stacks these elements of danger to create a profound feeling of claustrophobia. Think about the geometry of the threat here. It's fascinating. You've got the stormy village acting as the base, then floodwaters are rising up from below, strong winds are bearing down from above, and right in the middle of this vice grip is a frightened populace, completely trapped. The stakes are escalating with literally every single noun and adjective. Moving into Section 2, the divine intervention, a shift in focus. So just as that claustrophobia peaks, the narrative completely pivots. Notice the stark contrast here. It brings an immediate, almost physical sense of relief into the scene. On one side, we've got the cold, chaotic, really aggressive physical environment, the storm, the floods, the wind. But clashing directly against that on the other side is the warm, divine intervention. The text is creating a literal collision between the harshness of nature and the gentle, penetrating power of heavenly light. Focus specifically on the language being used right here. Jesus radiates a warm divine light. That active verb, radiates, is just so powerful. It implies an energy that's actively pushing back against the storm. And the sensory adjective warm, well, that isn't just about temperature, is it? It's about safety, comfort, and salvation. These words are acting like a spotlight, commanding our visual focus completely away from the darkness of the storm and locking it securely onto the figure of rescue. All right, Section 3, the calming resolution. Action and reaction. Let's take a look at the narrative progression and see how this builds from just a static image into a completely dynamic sequence of events. Because, a scene isn't just a painting, it's a living, breathing timeline. The crucial point here is how these 4 sequential steps give us a complete, chronological story arc in just a few short sentences. We start at the crisis in Step 1, trapped by floodwaters. Step 2 introduces the action, reaching out a hand. Step 3 gives us the environmental reaction. The storm gradually calms. And finally, Step 4 delivers the resolution, guides to safety. Honestly, it's an absolute masterclass in efficient pacing. Now, within that sweeping arc, the author zooms right in on the specific details of the rescue. Rescuing a crying child. This is such a vital storytelling technique. Think about it. If you only talk about massive floodwaters and an entire village, it can feel a bit too distant, right? Too abstract. But by focusing on a crying child, the text grounds the massive, epic scale of this disaster into a highly intimate, relatable human moment. We can all instantly empathize with a frightened child. It grounds the scene. Because otherwise, we're really just looking at a very expensive weather simulation. Which brings us to Section 4, technical cinematic elements, the director's blueprint. So halfway through, the text entirely shifts gears from a traditional story into what sounds like a highly demanding technical manual. Breaking down these directives, the text is meticulously dictating the exact visual fidelity and technical execution it needs. Under visual style, it demands cinematic, 4K, ultra-realistic, highly detailed. Under effects, it's specifically calling out realistic water, heavenly rays, dramatic clouds. And it even dictates the camera work, asking for cinematic camera movements. This hypothetical director is clearly not accepting amateur work here, right? They aren't leaving anything to the imagination. They're actively directing the final visual output. By explicitly listing these exact parameters, the text makes a pretty bold demand. It demands that whoever is visualizing this, whether that's you, the reader, in your mind's eye, or a digital artist actually rendering the scene, they must accept absolutely no visual shortcuts. Masterpiece quality means every single ripple in the floodwater, every expression on a frightened face, every beam of light breaking through the clouds, it all has to be executed with absolute, uncompromised perfection. And finally, Section 5, the emotional masterpiece, beyond the visuals. So why demand all that technical perfection in the first place? Well, ultimately, those realistic water effects and that 4K resolution we just talked about, they are entirely subservient to these two phrases, emotional faces and inspirational atmosphere, because technical specs are totally meaningless without a soul. The high-definition details exist solely to make the fear on the faces more palpable and the relief of the rescue much more profound. The tech drives the emotional reaction, letting these instructions merge seamlessly with the emotional core of the story to leave a lasting impact on the audience. And that brings us to what might be the most critical word found near the end of our text, compassion. In this scene, compassion isn't just some vague, overarching theme. No, it is the active, driving force of the entire rescue sequence we just analyzed. It is demonstrated by the physical act of reaching down into those dirty, dangerous floodwaters to rescue the vulnerable. It's the ultimate contrast, really. Unimaginable divine power, utilized not for destruction, but for incredibly gentle, deliberate care. As we look at the concluding themes listed at the very end of our source text, hope, faith, compassion, and epic storytelling, we see how they serve as the ultimate emotional anchor. They prove to us that true epic storytelling isn't just about having a grand visual scale or a massive budget or rendering in 4K. True epic storytelling absolutely requires deep, resonant human connection to balance out all that spectacle. So I want to leave you with this final, thought-provoking question. How does the transition from a raging storm to heavenly rays ultimately define the power of epic storytelling? Think about the movies you love, the books you just can't put down, the art that genuinely moves you. It's almost always about contrast, isn't it? It's about moving from darkness into light, from chaos into resolution. And as we've seen today, sometimes all it takes is 70 perfectly chosen words to take us on that incredible journey. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.